up here, and you guys can switch back and forth. Again, if you guys have questions for them, there are 2 microphones right here. Just go there, stand, and I'll get to your question as soon as we can, so you can start lining up right now. The first question I have for all 4 of you guys, and of course you guys get to attend conferences all the time across the country, is today, here at Big Omaha, whose talks have you been inspired by, and what would you say you've learned today?
To Defy, like, that was awesome. I don't know what it was about necessarily learning, but reminding that, like, when you really screw up, don't hide it, just put it out in front, and you actually, the more you do that, end up winning as opposed to winning long term.
I love Ben's talk, man. Come on, that was off the hook. Jeez. I'm never opening for you again.
I'm definitely on board with the mushroom guys, the aquarium guys. I really liked what they were saying about, you know, it's not business as evil, business as usual, it's business for good. It's a great thing that we all keep in mind and start to take for granted because you hear it so often, but when you see people actually doing it, it's pretty inspiring.
And Neil, I mean, I think you and I technically should have cigars and scotch.
Yeah, no, these chairs are just like the
right
relaxer. I'm going to be knocked out. I think the 2 things that jumped out to me today that really resonated. One was, what do you stand for, right? So in the context of PAC or in the context of whoever you are, I think that really, it's like a great speaker articulates the thing that you were thinking that you didn't know you were thinking, and that really stuck with me. And I thought, the underpinning with Defy, like, there's a thing we can all root for, and these are people finding redemption, like we all want to find. But being vulnerable about yourself, I think, to echo what Ben said about making yourself vulnerable to, I made this mistake, or I did this thing wrong, or I had this error, and opening up about it is really hard, but every time you do it, something great comes.
Great. For the folks back here, if it's possible to get a timer on this monitor up here so I know where we stand time-wise, I know the monitor. The next question here, someone mentioned Catherine's talk earlier, and she's talking about moving on from, I guess a tragic experience in her life. All of you right now on the stage are here for a reason. You're successful. People know you in different capacities. Any personal failures you've experienced in terms of work, and how did you take those steps to move forward from them? I mean, Catherine shared a really, I guess, transparent example, but anything you can think of throughout your career, a really challenging moment, and how you were able to move forward from that?
People say this fail thing all the time. They're like, go ahead and fail. No one really wants to fail, right? Like, you don't actually want to have your thing stuck and bomb. But something that you just said at the end of that, where he was saying, you know, if you actually step over the line, that's sort of a heroic act. And the biggest failures that I have had, where I played it really safe for a couple of years, and that felt really bad to me, the whole time I was playing it safe. The whole, you know, safe is risky and risky is safe sort of thing, it felt really nasty to just sort of sit still and be complacent. And any time that I haven't pushed myself or I haven't stepped over the line, that's like one of the biggest failures for me.
Tony, we can look at your resume. We see About.me. We see that your successful investments. You talk about WordPress, but what things haven't gone so great? What's not on the resume? I always ask the question, what's not on the resume?
I've definitely had my creator. That's my other About.me page. It's the About Me not. No, I had one work experience where I was making a lot of dough, and I actually liked the work. I just really did not like the person I was doing that work with. And it's hard to divorce yourself from it, right? It's hard to walk away from the money and from kind of the prestige of the gig. But when I finally did it, I resigned myself and I said, I will never, ever, the rest of my life, work with people that I am not totally jazzed, like 1,000 freaking% waking up so excited to see them despite their flaws, right? And I committed myself to that. And, you know, it started with my co-founders in Sphere. It continues with my co-founders at True, my co-founders at About.me, and the type of individuals and people that I want to get involved with, right, and support. And so that's the biggest lesson I've taken away. And I've been happy since that very moment.
Great.
I'm a happy person.
I see it, man. Indiana, we have questions. We'll come to you guys in just one moment. Ben?
Yeah, I think probably, so one thing about the people I work with is I genuinely like the people I work with. I don't interview most people who come into the company anymore, and I definitely don't read resumes, but I like the people I work with. And, you know, I think one of my bigger failures recently was I saw like a set of skills that I thought someone could use in like a different position. And like I used my personal relationship with them to like convince them to take on that work because I just thought they could be so great. And like he didn't tell me this, but I'm pretty sure like I just made him totally miserable. He was a good friend and somebody whose work I really appreciated, and he inevitably told me, and I didn't deal with it that well either. I was kind of pissed. And it took me a while to understand that like I made a decision for someone else, like use my relationship with them to get them to do something, and at the end of it, like I was really not proud of myself. And that was a huge failure on my part.
That was great, man. I think the biggest failure I'd done a couple years ago was I talked about being from a community of people that create apps and things, and people start to have success as defined by themselves or their industry, get rich or famous or whatever they're shooting for, and I didn't want what they wanted. I wasn't jealous of this person has more money, and like I've got clean running water and food, like I'm square, I don't need anything else. And I thought I should want what they wanted. Right, so this huge failure I had was, what's wrong with me that everybody around me is chasing X, like whether that's money or except anything. I mean, I think whatever, but the aspiration, the goals that I started to have, I felt like it shouldn't be grounded in me, it shouldn't be authentic to me, it should be the things that are expected of you, or if people know who you are and they say this is the things you should want. And I started to feel very self-conscious or uncertain in the things that I cared about. And the way I got out of it was to be more extreme, right? To be more pointed, to be more critical, to be more of a loud, obnoxious voice about things. Because the tamping down of how I felt was making me miserable and not accomplishing anything, including moving me along towards goals I didn't want anyway. So this huge failure was just not being true to what I wanted, even if it was something that was different than what everybody else valued.
I see you looking at yourself in the mirror saying, why don't I want more?
Well, I think it's hard as like Americans to say, culturally, I'm good. I have what I want. Like my son is never gonna want for a roof over his head. That's it. Like everything else is gravy. And so we're trained to like want, I don't know, cars. I haven't owned a car in like 15 years. I can't even tell you the names of cars. I go to rent a car and I'm like, what is that? I've never heard of that car. Because I don't care, and I feel like I'm supposed to care, and I just don't. And now, like the biggest failure I had was like, trying to read up on cars. I'm like, I don't give a shit.
Makes me think about that Chris Rock joke where only in America can people be allergic to food, like we're gluten intolerant and we're allergic to peanuts. Like go to some third world country, they will eat it.
Yeah.
Because that's how all the wealth we have here. Megan, you have a question over here.
Hi guys. I like what you just said, Anil, about how you can be critical and then also that's kind of obnoxious, because that kind of speaks to my question. I want to ask each of you personally if you have a quality that's very entrepreneurial, like persistence, and sometimes that can be perceived as like really stubborn. Is that something, do each of you have something like that you're kind of trying to work on in yourself to kind of, I don't know, it's a weird question, like sort of balance your toolbox of skill sets that you can bring to a company as an entrepreneur? I don't know, that's something I struggle with. It's been on my mind.
Anything in the toolbox you need to work on? And Ben, I heard you mention.
What don't you want people to know about you? What is it that you kind of bury, Because I'm like an asshole, and I don't want everyone to know that, and I just said it, and I'm going to stop
I think
talking.
you have to tone down the asshole gland.
Yeah.
Right? I think that the reality is if you're going to start a company and you have the confidence to do it, and you also see the way you want a product to function, you're going to have really strong opinions that come with that. Part of that becomes, how do I communicate those without being so abrasive that no one wants to be close to me, right? And the reality is when they leave, you know you've gone too far. Appreciate that. If people are fleeing, tone it back. If you're building a really great team and you're getting good feedback and people are saying, well, it would be helpful to me if you communicated this other way, like really appreciate that. That's something that like I had to learn over time. But if I could change one thing about myself, I guess it would be like I love having clean socks on. It's like one of my favorite things in the world, and I never have clean socks. I would love that.
Megan, who are you?
Thank you.
I've got some clean socks on. I'm happy to share. I mean, there's a lot, you know. I don't want to just sit up here and beat on myself. Thanks. No.
This is like our Oprah moment.
Yeah, this is.
Come on, tell me about it.
Really?
Come on, you can tell me.
So Tony.
Just you and me up here. Come on, let's talk.
That's like the interview when people are like, my problem is I'm a perfectionist and I just get everything right. No, I'm kidding. The thing that, like, so if I address that from the thing that I really just feel bad about when I screw this up is that the idea of delivering on promises. I deliver on the big promises, like the big promises that I make to the people that I work with and the people in my lives and the products that you're going to do, those big promises, I deliver on those or I die trying. But the little stuff where it's just like, you know, little things that you need to do, like, oh, I'll get that to you by Tuesday. Like, it's always going to be Wednesday, and I feel bad about that, you know? And so I try to adjust my behavior around those sorts of things because the more you do that, the more, you know, you start to look unreliable when it's really just, man, I am doing so much stuff that I think it's about setting expectations, and I'm trying to learn to do a better job of setting expectations and knowing myself as opposed to always being like, yes, I'm going to get everything done all at once. So there's fallouts that come out of that can be bigger than this very small missed email that doesn't feel like anything now, but it means you're not able to close that deal, you know, three weeks later. So that's, I think, something that I don't know anybody who's really perfect at that, but I'd love to learn from somebody who is better than I am.
Tony, is there anything people who say worked with you 10 years ago, who still work with you to this day, how would they say maybe you have evolved as an entrepreneur or as a leader?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One, definitely learning to let go a little bit. And I think I think as a founder, you go through lots of different stages, and if you're lucky, right, with your company. And one of the stages early on is trying to figure out the magic of that product and make sure that it has product market fit and it makes sense. And I think as a founder, if you don't devote your soul, even if you're not a product person, if you don't have an instinctive vision for that and able to apply yourself, it ain't gonna happen. I think you have to have your paw prints all over it. But there's a moment where it does work, and you gotta back off, and doesn't mean you don't have your, you know, hands on the pulse of it, right? Like, but you need your team to own it, right? You need others to own it, and I've learned how to get better at that. I'm still not 100% there. And then I think the other thing that happens, you know, for all of us is because, you know, either we've become comfortable being on stage, or we're charismatic, or we have accomplishments, or whatever it is why we get to sit here. After a while, it's like feeding the ego. It's like feeding the beast. And, you know, what you all have to remember, like I've read a bunch of tweets today, and they're super flattering, and thank you, and whatnot, and I've seen a few articles that have been written, and that's great about .me. But you know what? They forget to mention Ryan Freitas. He's my co-founder. About.me doesn't exist without Ryan Freitas.
And he's a talented leader.
I just get to be the face, right? Because I'm pretty. But but I think that notion of making sure it dawned on me in the last couple of years, where I've been fortunate and had enough exposure and luck, that exposure just creates more exposure and potentially more luck. And what I've been working on really hard is, how do I remind everybody else that it's just not me, right? It's not just about me. It's about my team, and it's about everybody who's collectively making an effort. And so, That's the thing I just want to be cognizant of as my new challenge as I move forward.
We'll come to your question in just one moment, but I'd like to hear Neil's answer to that.
Yeah, it's like this is totally like confessional. Like, my name is Anil Dash, and I'm a mansplainer. You have that thing where you want to answer questions. Again, like when you're in the front of the room, right? That people ask you questions, and it sort of doesn't matter whether I know a little bit about technology. I know a little bit about funk music. So if you're planting a garden, I'll have advice on that for no reason because I think I know the answer. And I think it's really hard to say I don't know. And to really, really practice, I was in a room full of experts on like education policy, which I know nothing about, and I had to keep kicking myself and say, you don't know jack shit about this. You should be shutting up and listening instead of trying to be the expert, the authority, or whatever. And there's a tension here because I also, I don't really believe in humility. I think probably the most succinct way to say it is anybody who has more money than you shouldn't be reminding you to be humble. Right? And I always come back to that of like, I look at the heroes I grew up looking at, Muhammad Ali or Prince or somebody, and they were always like, I'm going to love myself until everybody else does too. And you get that reinforcement because that actually really works. Like you have to really, really believe in yourself. But the flip side of that is you have to not think that means that any random question somebody has or any conversation somebody's had, you've got the answer to. And that's a really tough thing to do is somebody looks to you as authority if you're in a position of leadership, you're in a place where people know what your name is or whatever else, and they say something and you say, I don't know. Or two people are having a conversation and you have that drive of, I can add something, I know something about this. I read one article in an airplane magazine, therefore I must be a world-class expert and authority on this thing. So just shut up, sit down, this ain't Quora. You can actually just chill out and read what's going on. So.
And actually, I'd like to add something to that. Just kidding.
Nicely done. That was good.
Good, right? Okay. You were with me. Go for it, man.
Hi, my name is Paul. I just recently moved home back to the Midwest to start a tech company in Iowa City, Iowa, and I'm really excited to be part of this, what you guys have known for a while and how this vibrant Midwest culture, and I'm really excited to be back. So my question is, two-part question. Number one of the mysteries for a lot of startups that may even be amplified for companies starting up in the Midwest is when the timing is right to go and talk to VCs and how to get meetings with the right VCs and get the right introductions to get there. And then part two, on the off chance that your answer to part one is to just stand up in the middle of a conference when you have a microphone in front of everybody and just ask for a meeting. I was wondering, Tony, what your schedule looks like.
We get the round of applause for
maybe
that,
next.
Right? I like that. Real quick, your name and the name of your company.
Paul Kongsau, Blend Card.
Got it. Anyone, in terms of that attention or trying to get that meeting with FVC? Tony, I guess he's talking to you, really.
It's all about me, baby.
Not your co-founder.
Yeah, I get asked that question. I get asked that question a lot. What's the right time? I think it depends, right? So developing relationships, the right time is right this second. Always be developing relationships in our community. And that includes fellow founders, fellow entrepreneurs, investors, lawyers, all kinds of people, right? And I think the best time to kind of forge and seed those relationships is when you actually don't need anything, right? Except for the goodwill and the gesture of, I'm a participant in this community, and I'm excited you're in it, and I'd like to know you, right? I think that's kind of low touch, low baggage, easy to do. Pragmatically, when I think the right time to come pitch your ideas, if you're a first-time founder, I think maybe you want to spend a little bit of time trying to work through proof of concept. At least that doesn't mean like a working product and all that kind of stuff. That may not be realistic, but I think really to be thoughtful in that you're on the kind of the right path before sitting down, with what's a silver bullet kind of meeting, right, to get funding. So I think that's super important. I can't remember the second part of your question. I know the second part. I remember that second part. There was two.
That was cold as ice. Wow.
So no, you will not have a meeting tomorrow.
I couldn't remember the second part of your first question. It was what about timing and?
No, timing and how to get meetings.
Oh, and how to get meetings. Best way to get meetings is through other founders. Period. Right? Listen, if you can't figure out how to network, we have 140 companies in our portfolio, probably 150 at this point. We have over 300 founders. We've employed now through these companies somewhere probably around 10,000 people. If you can't find somebody in that network that you can get to figure out how to introduce you to whoever it is, then you kind of failed the first test. It's not to be rude, right? But it's like I get so many inbounds out of context, and you know I'm angry at you when you guys send me like stuff out of context because I don't want to be a dick. You know what I mean? I'm not predisposed to being a dick. I'm not. I want to be nice. Yeah, it sucks. I can't respond to all that. Like, it has no context, right? So I want people to be more thoughtful in their approach to me. I'm sure other investors do as well. And I think that's helpful, and it's a better. Maybe it takes a little longer to get there, but it's a more efficient use of your time.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit of context to that, just having been through. So I'm not an investor, and I get people pitching me, right? This is actually how spammy people can be, right? Is they're like, and part of this is like tech trade press sucks. So I got a list of like top angel investors in New York City. I'm not an angel investor. This is the rigor with which they make these lists. And so it gives you a really good view of who's just straight up spamming every person on that list. And it was really great. And there was a couple things that came out of that experience of people saying, will you write me a check? When I'm like, for what? Like, I don't do that. First was, and I think this amplifies Tony's point about the network, it's not second nature if you're in a community that is thousands of miles away from Silicon Valley and all those other things, to think about that network of 150, 200 founders within a particular fund, or 10,000 employees in all their different companies.
I disagree. I think that the people in this room actually know how to do that, and they did that for me. And I say that only because every investor we have was connected to me through people who are sitting in this room.
Sure, I'm not questioning that. What I want to get to more is, so we have systematic underinvestment in women, in people of color. Like the investment patterns don't look like the users on these networks. There's a disproportionately high percentage of users of social networks that are African American, and they have ideas for apps because they're using them, and they're not getting investment. And so some of this is when you say you have to be in my network. I actually think it's more efficient, it is more inclusive, but it doesn't mean it's perfectly inclusive. It doesn't mean it's appropriately inclusive. And so we have to be thoughtful about, well, that means that if you're looking for funds and you're not somebody that's traditionally gotten this money, you're going to be extending yourself to where you're not comfortable. And that's the flip side. The other part of what I want to say is you always have to act like you belong. When somebody spams me with something, thinking this is the only chance they're ever going to get to send me something, I'm sure you get this a lot, Tony. Somebody talks to you like they finished a marathon by showing up at your office, and they're like, I just want to get everything out, and I want to run through this deck, and this is my make or break, my one moment, like it's the movies. And when you act like that, like you're never going to be in the room with somebody that can write a check again, they can read it on you. They can see it on you. They can see you saying, I don't really belong here. I'm pretending. And that's
yeah, I think that, like, to answer your question, like, figure out who you want to talk to, start there. Pick investors that invest in your space and can help you solve problems that you currently have. Literally write down who and why. And then start to ask people here, specifically other founders, who knows those people. You will probably be really surprised. You get some meetings, you'll fuck them up, it'll be great. Start there and don't stop until it's done. It's the right time to raise money when it makes sense for your company.
Ben, real quick, you mentioned, of course, during your talk how important it was for you to get some fresh Silicon Prairie news that led to investment on your end, but on top of that, identifying those investors. Can you just talk briefly about having a track record? I mean, the importance of having a track record. You got that press from Silicon Prairie News for a reason, so he also has to have a track record.
I mean, having something that's referenceable and, more importantly, usable, I think is really helpful. If the product is an idea I personally don't see it as valuable, or like it needs to work. Spend less time talking about the product and more time showing the actual product. I think that's also really important. I think probably a lot of people can raise money just on an idea that doesn't exist. I am not one of those people, and I think anyone in this room will have a hard time with that.
We don't have a lot more time, so I want to get to as many questions as possible. Let's go right over here, please.
Hey guys, Scott Meyer, bro founder of 9 Clouds. I'm been to 4 big Omahas, and one thing that is consistent throughout is this idea of culture, right? We're really interested in the Midwest culture. We talked a little bit about not just doing business, but doing what's good and right. But I think by definition, those terms mean that you also are against something, right? So your culture is not inclusive of something, or your good is different than someone else's good. And so if we really are going to be companies that are pursuing a movement, does that limit our potential? Because we have to say, if you believe in these things, if you believe in these terms of service or whatever, that you're not going to use this app or this program or whatever it might be.
Megan, are you against cats? So,
Exactly.
are you limiting something there? But more of the idea of the movement, as you mentioned, like you're really being focused on dogs. I know Tony talked a lot earlier about movements, but it's a really interesting point.
Well, I mean, like I was saying earlier, like if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing, right? And yeah, I believe, obviously I'm participating now in a very, very niche vertical. That's kind of redundant. But it's in a massive industry, it's in a massive scale, there's a massive reach for users. But yeah, it's a niche, and the minute you start trying to diversify something, you're just gonna water it down. I think there's plenty of cases where if your product is a platform for proliferation, then you can get, for getting remixed and I mean, WordPress is the perfect example, like they shouldn't have tried to own some sort of a topical niche, but they certainly wanted to say, we're gonna be, here's a platform for writing, and they never turned it into this really other sort of community network thing like Squidoo was. It was much more of a tool, so they were standing for that. Does that answer some of the question at all? I mean, it's just thoughts, but.
Yeah, and maybe even more so like the idea of good. We talk a lot about it today, and so I'm just curious because it's not going to be the same for everyone. So
Yeah, Neil, you touched on that a bit earlier about good versus evil.
Yeah, I think there's a couple points. The first is it's absolutely great to make a product, an app, or service for a narrow audience with a particular purpose. There is nothing intrinsic that says good means a billion users. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence to the contrary. It's like picking your audience and knowing who you're surveying and being very, very meaningful to them. This space is not going to hold 100,000 people, but it's meaningful to a couple hundred people in this room. So I think that's really powerful. I think the second part to the sort of the good dichotomy is, again, if you succeed, what does the world look like? If you make an app for millionaires to book private jets, this is a real thing. Somebody made this. Have you solved the problem? I guess technically. Is this the biggest, best use? Is this the thing that wakes you up in the morning? That would be terrifying.
Let's get to a couple more questions. We're almost out of time. Let's start right over here.
So if you could go back 10 years and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be? I mean entrepreneur advice, not like bet everything on the 2004 Red Sox.
Get it in writing.
Say that one more time.
Get it in writing. A lot of people say stuff verbally, they don't do it, period. Like, get it in writing. Everything is bullshit that is not in writing.
I'd have to go back 20. I think it's what I said earlier. It's find people that you're super jazzed to partner with, to work with, to be around, and then double, triple, quadruple down.
Going into linear fashion. It's design your own life. I mean, no, you're not living anyone else's life, and there's all these rules that you think are rules and they're not rules. So make it up for yourself.
I think in the same train of thought, know when you're right. Know it, like you know in your gut, and believe it, and don't let any son of a bitch convince you otherwise, ever.
Great. We'll do one last question for this panel right over here. I think that's my friend Brett.
Hey guys, my name's Brett. you guys are all like really, really great speakers and like in front of people and like not have a problem with this. I've done this before. I've been in front of people before and I kind of suck at it. So like, is there anything that like you've done over time that you maybe just haven't been public about or just like practiced, or is it just you just going up in this mic in front of times and like failing so much that you're finally good at being in front of a mic and talking to people and speaking at a conference like this?
Yeah, so how have you ever, it's not natural to everyone to be able to grab a microphone, get up and present to a group, whether it's like this or maybe even it's a pitch meeting to investors or demo day. For you guys, how have you guys developed that skill set to be a command a stage and a microphone?
No, listen, I don't know about these people, but I get nervous every time, you know? I always have to remind the sound booth guys, please turn off the mic as I'm coming up because I need to clear my throat, like, 10 times and to get myself comfortable. And you know, it's never easy. You know, I like, you know, the easiest thing to do is to get on a panel or a fireside chat. And you know, it's a little harder to stand up here and I think and do what the four of us did today. This is somewhat easy, the panel, I think, at this stage. But to get up and actually talk about something, you know, I don't do it that often because it's hard. And it requires that you be thoughtful because you know, so many of you have come and you're interested in what we have to say. We owe it to you to actually be thoughtful, right? And to try to put together a narrative that you can follow and maybe will be impactful to you, you know, hopefully. Not just entertaining, but, you know, mean something. And so, you know, doing a speech like that, you know, it requires a lot of commitment and a lot of practicing. And then there's a gazillion other tips that I'm sure maybe they'll share with you, but it's never easy, dude.
You have to really believe what you're saying. I've had horrible speeches, just tripping over my words, embarrassing myself, forgetting what I was saying. And it's always when if I'm trying to do the same talk twice, talking about something I've discussed before, something I'm not passionate about. You know, one of the downsides if you get known for a topic or a particular conversation is people want to bring you in and be like, do that thing again. Right, and then you're the oldies act in Vegas singing a song from 50 years ago. And a bunch of people hearing the same song. And for me, like all my inspiration, like I love pop music, and I grew up watching whoever you want, Michael Jackson or Prince or Bruce Springsteen, and all those guys. What's really interesting to me, great live performers, incredible shows, hours and hours and hours of dancing and singing and whatever, and they get off stage and they're all super quiet, right? They're like almost introverted, like it's all out there on stage, and I think it's. Part of it's like these are these songs that mean something to them, and then they go back and they're thinking about it. And I think that if you find yourself struggling to know what to say, ask yourself if the reason why is because you're not passionate about what you're saying.
That makes sense.
It's a great question, Ben.
Yeah, I think that like socially and emotionally for me, speaking is like really uncomfortable. I think speaking in public and also talking to investors to me feels somewhat analogous to meeting somebody for the first time, taking off all your clothes with the lights on, letting them talk out loud about you while your eyes are closed, knowing that it is their job in your relationship to talk about everything that was wrong with you after you leave the room, still with no clothes on. Where there will be pictures posted on the internet later of every little thing you did wrong, especially if it's in public like this. But the reality is one, I really care about this community, and I really care about people understanding why Douala is so important systemically, not only to me, but to other people. And I'm willing to do that because I believe that those two things are worth it. And inevitably, if it's worth it to you, you just got to keep doing it. And it does never really go away. It gets a little bit easier, but it never totally goes away.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, ladies and gentlemen. That was the last question we could take for this panel. Please give it up for Ben Milne, Tony Conrad, Megan Casey, and Emil Dash. Yeah, it's okay.